Thank you for listening to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast, available on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Stitcher. Also, please follow Matt's Movie Reviews on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Reddit, Instagram, and MeWe. And of course, be sure to visit mattsmoviereviews.net for the latest reviews, top 10 lists, and more. Now, on to the show. Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I am your host, Matthew Pejkovic, and this is episode number 438. Releasing June 16 on Shudder is Mad God, an experimental stop-motion film set in a world of monsters, mad scientists, and war pigs, into which an assassin descends into a horrific hellscape of no rhyme or reason. A film 30 years in the making, Mad God is written and directed by Phil Tippett, the award-winning stop-motion animator and special effects supervisor who, I believe, has delivered his best work yet with Mad God. And I'm happy to say Phil joins me now on the podcast. Mr. Phil Tippett, I thank you so very much for your time.
You're welcome.
It's really interesting just reading up just about Mad God and the process of bringing it to the screen. From what I read, like you actually put together a few minutes of footage like back in the early 90s, I believe it was. Other work commitments led to you kind of having to shelve the project. But what was it that kind of brought you back to these first few minutes that led you on the journey to what we are going to see on screens next week?
Well, I am very driven, and I'm bipolar. And so once I glom onto something, I just cannot let it go. And even when in the darkest hour, when I realized that that Mad God was, beyond my ability to be able to execute it because it was so huge in scope. I spent the next 20 years, doing my day job and supervising and directing animators and whatnot. But in the evenings and on the weekends and when I was on location and had time off, I would just work on this stuff, all the time. And it was kind of like, pursuing this dream. And eventually, some of the guys at my studio that were computer graphics artists had always wanted to work on, they were inspired by RoboCop and Star Wars, making of documentaries. Mm-hmm. And so this was an opportunity for them to, get their hands dirty, literally.
I also read that you are a prolific dreamer. How much do your dreams or your nightmares kind of like influence what we see on the screen? Is there kind of like things that you actually remember from your dreams or perhaps your nightmares that actually we're seeing on screen right now?
No, never. No, none of them. But the dreams were significant, for a few reasons. One is that, when I started in earnest about 12 years ago, working on the Mad God, I started dreaming every single night. And they were long dreams that I cataloged, in like a big ledger, sometimes 6 or 8 pages long. And I didn't know what I was doing, like everything else that I do. And so once I had compiled, a couple of books, I went back and read them with the intention of seeing it, if there was any kind of how the narrative structure of my dreams operate. Because, when you meet up at the breakfast table in the morning, you say like, oh, I had this weird dream that was about this shark and this alien that, ate my foot. And then you forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't think about it. And the highlights, you usually don't get past, oh, I had a weird dream. And so what I found in kind of like doing dream archaeology was it's laid out almost like in a three-act structure, where at the beginning there is something there that needs to be developed, say like in a story, and so it's maybe some kind of conflict or peril or whatever, and then the middle gets very kind of murky, and then at the end there's some kind of resolution to it, or something that puts the first two into some kind of perspective. And so it was significant in that regard. And the other thing was, when Mad God was finished, I stopped dreaming, just like that.
It's very interesting. I'm also fascinated about, how do you get your visual ideas out of your head onto the screen? What's the in between there? Do you like to storyboard? Do you like to illustrate? Are those kind of the things that you start with first before you start molding things out in statues and such?
Yeah, tons of drawings and tons of storyboards. I found that over that 20-year period, I would do a storyboard a scene and then might not look at it for months or sometimes years, and then not look at it again, and then go back and redo it. And then maybe, sometime later, not look at the previous two and go back and redo it. And then just kind of, compare and cherry pick between the two. But usually it's a development process where the unconscious is working. And usually the later ones are a lot stronger, the ones that I pick. But occasionally, sometimes you have a good idea earlier on.
The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by 80s Tees. 80s Tees is an online retailer of licensed t-shirts and pop culture gear from your favorite movies, TV shows, cartoons, video games, comic books, and musicians. Celebrate your inner 80s nerd and click on the link in the show notes below to get the raddest retro t-shirts delivered to your door. The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by Loot Crate. Founded in 2012, Loot Crate is the worldwide leader in fan subscription boxes. Loot Crate partners with industry leaders in entertainment, gaming, sports, and pop culture to deliver monthly themed crates, produce interactive experiences in digital content, and film original video productions. No matter what you geek out about, Loot Crate has a subscription box for you. To get your very own exclusive collectibles, apparel, and gear delivered to your door, be sure to click on the link in the show notes below. The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by TeePublic. TeePublic is the world's largest marketplace for independent creators to sell their work on the highest quality merchandise. With over 1.2 million designs, TeePublic is sure to have something you love. Mad God is described as a passion project, and I always find it interesting when people use the term passion project, because passion in the Latin origins of the name actually means suffering, which is why we have, passion play, passion cross, etc.
Exactly.
When it comes to this film, Mad God, that passion, and I think it comes to a lot of people that have a creative kind of flair to them. Like, I don't know if you can see behind me, but on my board, I got a list of articles I want to work on. There's no way I'm going to get on any of these things, but I always have the idea that I want to get on this stuff. For me, it's kind of like I'm chasing kind of like some type of perfection in my writing that I know I never attain, but I always keep chasing it, and it kind of drives me crazy in doing so. When it comes to your own perspective of suffering for your art, is it something that you have to go through? Is there in no way but that way in regards to what you want to achieve to get the ideas out of your head onto the screen?
You know, I mean, not when I was doing my day job, working on movies, because that's so well organized and you're working with so many people. But with Mad God, because of the length of time that I worked on it, and I went, pretty deep. I ended up kind of physically disintegrating and spent a couple of days in the psych ward, and maybe 6 weeks or so to recover myself, and that's also not unusual.
Very sorry to hear that you had to go through that. I went through a similar thing myself last year and actually got diagnosed with ADHD only like a month ago, which is something that I supposedly had all this time, but I only just know now that I have it. And I kind of look back at my life and I think about all these things that could have been maybe, I don't know, dodged if I knew about this earlier. But it's interesting how sometimes when we go through these processes, how it kind of reveals things about ourselves. And I think Mad God is something that did that for you, didn't it? In reaching that breaking point, that kind of revealed something about yourself that maybe you didn't know beforehand.
Well, I have been diagnosed. Actually, I self-diagnosed myself and then had it corroborated by therapists and psychiatrists.
Mm-hmm.
Was that I'm unipolar? I don't get depressed unless I see, Ukraine devastated, or 20 kids shot in Texas. That's something reasonable to get depressed about, but otherwise I'm just manic, which is my superpower. And that really got me through all that stuff and drove me crazy as well. And the passion metaphor or analogy is really accurate.
When do you know that this project, Mad God, had to come to an end? Was it a thing of maybe there was like, as soon as you got distribution, that it was like external forces that more like put like a deadline on it? And that's kind of like where it came to an end. And do you view this project as being finished, or is it just a project that you just had to let go and go out into the world?
No, I mean, mostly while we were working on it, it was like the movie, the Agony and the Ecstasy,
Mm-hmm.
when the Pope is asking Charlton Heston, who's playing Michelangelo, which is ridiculous.
Right.
When is it going to be finished? He would say, when it's done. And that was my approach, I mean, and it got to the point where I actually hated working on it,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like getting behind the mule and like suffering every day. I just hated it, but I was compelled to go on until I broke my own mind, and that is not atypical of quite a few people. The Carl Jung wrote this book that I ran across that Taschen put out a few years back, and it's a really great publication, and it's called The Red Book, and it didn't have a title when Jung was writing it, but it was a red ledger, and that's how it got the name. And it was the same thing, it was the Joseph Campbell's hero's journey thing, where he let his mind go and go down a path, and it popped his cork, and his family helped pull him out of it. And I mean, that's not, it's just, if you look into the history of art, that's just not atypical at all.
Final question. I read this this anecdote about you at a screening for Mad God recently, and these parents brought their kids to the screening, and you're like, Miss, I don't think this is a movie that your kids should be watching. And sure enough, a few
No, what
minutes
I
in.
told them is I wouldn't bring my kids to this.
And sure enough, a few minutes in, they said, yes, you are correct. And they left. But I'm curious, though. I got two boys myself, aged 10 and 7. And I love for them to get into watching stop motion. And what we have watched so far is kind of like those Bill Ives narrated Christmas stories, the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and such. They've watched that. But if you could recommend something to a family man like myself that my kids could watch in regards to the stop motion world, what type of movies or shows would you recommend?
How old are your children?
10 and 7.
Oh, I do. But you probably already know the answer.
Well, I'd love to hear what your recommendation is.
Oh, King Kong, the original King Kong, not Peter Jackson's.
Yes,
not.
Yeah.
And oh boy, Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, Jason and the Argonauts, all of Ray Harryhausen's movies. When my kids were that age, and they were roughly that same age difference, that's when I probably started showing them when they were around 6, and they still love them. It's like comfort food. When they come home, they're in their 30s now, and when they come home, occasionally we will watch the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad again.
My view of what my kids watch in regards to movies and shows is kind of similar to the advice that Milos Forman gave you, which I believe it was, if you eat good food, you're going to like process it and make good things out of it. And I'm saying that in a more kind of PC version.
Yes, you are. That was a very, very intelligent interpretation for the audience.
Yes, and that's definitely what I'll do for my kids. And I thank you so very much for your recommendation. And I thank you very much for your time today as well. If
know what else? That it may be YouTube that you find it on, but is the work of Carl Zeman. Zeman. He was a Czech filmmaker that used all kinds of techniques to put his movies together, and he was very influential on Mad God to me. And so Zeman's great kid stuff.
Well, thank you very much for your recommendation. I got that written down. And for everyone else out there, have it written down in your diary, your notepad, July 16 on Shudder, Mad God. Watch it. I highly recommend it. It's a fantastic work here. And Phil Tippett, I thank you so very much for your time again. Congratulations with Mad God. And hopefully we're going to see more from you, because I think you got so much more to offer us. I thank you for your time today.
Fine. It won't be anything like Mad God. It'll be a lot more commercial because I want to get it. But we'll see if I get the money.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time today. Congrats with the movie again, and best of luck with the film's release.
Okay, my pleasure, and thank you.
Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content. Also, if you would like to request a review and support my work, please join my Patreon via the link in the description below.